Welcome to It's No Accident, a podcast about the challenges of personal injury and wrongful death law in Florida, one of the nation's most complex legal environments.
You'll hear compelling stories about real cases from our law firm in Tallahassee that will help you better understand your rights and protect yourself from the negligence of others.
I'm Mark Nani.
And I'm Jaeson Hamola.
And this is
It's No Accident.
You know, we got getting into the summer got the kids, college students returning back to school. So there's always some legal issues that come up along those lines. Certainly I know one of the big ones that we see a lot is, drunk driving, right? Unfortunately, kids driving around town drinking and driving. And so I know, there's definitely some different types of liability that can come up along those lines. And I know over the years, we both handled some of those cases, but, specifically, I think you have handled a couple more recently. You want to talk about that a little bit, some dram shop cases?
Yeah, they're called dram shop cases. It's liquor liability cases, whatever you want to call them. I've handled quite a few over the years. Not so many lately because it's just gotten so difficult with the state of what the law is in Florida on these cases. It's gotten so difficult to prove liability in them that I haven't had as many lately. I do have one going on right now that I can't really get into. But these cases are called dram shop cases. The baseline in these cases is that bars can't be held responsible for serving alcohol to minors, serving alcohol to anyone. They can't be held liable. That's the common law. Comes from years ago. They can't be held liable for serving alcohol and injuries that result from that. Years ago, 30, 40 years ago, the Florida legislature put in place two exceptions to that baseline rule. And those two exceptions are willfully serving alcohol to a known underage individual. So serving a minor, that if you serve somebody that you know to be a minor, that person goes out and gets injured, the bar can be held responsible. The other exception is if the bar serves what they know to be, the term is a habitual alcoholic. It's what you would think of as a drunk or an alcoholic. They go out, they injure themselves, they injure somebody else, the bar can be held responsible. So most people, people come in, people call, and they say, look, I was injured, this person was overserved. They were clearly overserved, they were drunk, they were at this bar. I want to go after them. I want to go after the bar. Well, unless that person's a minor and the bar knew about it, or unless that person was an alcoholic and we can prove they're an alcoholic, you don't really have a case. And most people are surprised to hear that. And over the years, it's gotten even more difficult, just the way the case law has come down to bring these cases. Just some of the evidentiary issues that come up in them, the case law is not very good. The law on how you can prove up and what the standard is for a habitual drunk, the standard for what is considered to be knowingly serving somebody, those have created several issues for us. And it's just gotten so much more difficult. And there was interestingly, the leading case on dram shop law in Florida is a case out of Tallahassee that the Florida Supreme Court just ruled on. They ruled on some really legal issues that we don't really need to get into.
It's really in the weeds.
It's really in the weeds. And even as a lawyer, you have to look at the arguments and read the decision a few times over to really understand what they're ruling and what the issues were that they were dealing with. But can you talk a little bit about that case that came out of Tallahassee?
Yeah. So, it was really, the big issue in that case was comparative negligence, right? And whether or not whether or not the defense was able to bring up any comparative negligence of this girl who got hit by a drunk driver, right? And the comparative negligence, I think, in that case, and tell me if I'm wrong, was that she was under the influence too, right?
Yeah.
And so basically, they had the trial for this case where this, a guy who was underage was served and was drunk and drove, and then she had been drinking too, this girl who ended up getting hit and severely injured. And so there was a lawsuit in the trial over that. And at the trial, basically, the jury wasn't told that this girl was under the influence as well. Right. And the judge in the trial court, said that it wasn't based on, again, some kind of in the weeds reasons that the jury shouldn't know that she was under the influence too, because basically I guess the focus was on, the guy and whether or not he was under the influence and what he would have done, right?
And then the fact that the law was put in place to protect people
Right.
like her.
Exactly.
The law against serving minors was put in place to protect her, and under Florida law, when a situation like that happens, that if the law was in place to protect her, she's a minor, and somebody violates that law, then they can't be held comparatively negligent.
Right, exactly. But that's what the Florida Supreme Court said no, that the jury should have heard, basically overturned the verdict. That there was a trial of it, the plaintiffs won, they got I can't remember the number, a rather large verdict, and then on appeal, recently the Florida Supreme Court overturned that and basically said no, the jury should have heard that this girl the victim who got injured should have been told that she was under the influence too, and they should have taken that into account in determining what percentage of fault goes on who, right? And
Right.
basically overturn the verdict. And I don't know where it is now. I mean, I think they have the option of doing another trial if they want,
They do, and it's crazy. I've kept up with it a little bit, just because I handle these types of cases, and it came out of Tallahassee, and it was a well-known bar in Tallahassee. Everybody knows this bar, and it's just an unfortunate situation. And I want to say that this case happened like 10 years ago.
It was a while ago.
Because
they've already had 2 trials, right?
they've had 2 trials. The first trial, the jury came back and couldn't make a decision. It was a hung jury.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second trial, like you said, there was a several multi-million-dollar verdict. Got appealed. That took, a year or so for that decision to come down. Appeals court made their decision, and then it was appealed again at the Florida Supreme Court. Goes up to the Supreme Court, takes, another 6 months to a year for that court to come down with their decision. And here we sit, I want to say it was almost 10 years. I don't think it was exactly 10 years, but 7 to 10 years later, we're sitting here and this family still hasn't gotten an answer,
Right.
or gotten the justice that they deserve.
Right. Which actually, I mean, kind of ties into something that we talk about with our clients a lot, not necessarily related to Dram Shop, but just generally, whenever we're at a mediation or something and talking about whether or not the client wants to settle, one of the things we always talk to them about is, if you don't settle and we go to trial, and you get your day in court and we win, that's not necessarily going to be the end of it, right?
No.
I mean, just in terms of the fact that, again, like you're saying, that this case has gone to trial 2 times, it's been almost 10 years, and, even if you win at trial, appeals come, right? And the appeal process takes forever. And so, I don't know, it's just kind of a tangential thing, but it's something we talk to clients a lot about is, we go to trial and win, that's not necessarily the end of it. It could be another 2 or 3 years because of the appeals process, and during that time, you don't get any money,
Right.
And then if the appellate court doesn't go our way, then you got to go back and do it all over again.
Right.
So
And
sometimes it's better just to settle and not have to go through all that,
that costs money, number one. So it eats into whatever the award from the jury was.
Mm-hmm.
And then number 2, the time element to it. And number 3, the higher your verdict, the more likely that there's going to be an appeal.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you go to a jury trial and you knock it out of the park and the jury comes back and, you've got a several $million verdict, you're not getting that money in a week.
Right.
The higher the verdict, the more the defense is going to dig their heels in. They are going to go through the transcripts of that trial with a fine-tooth comb, and they are going to find some arguments to try to convince an appeals court to overturn that verdict.
Right. Absolutely.
And
But yeah, no, going back to the Dram Shop stuff, though, like you said, there's the 2 ways, either serving a known habitual drunk or knowingly serving someone who's underage. Between the 2, obviously, it sounds like, the known habitual drunk is the harder thing to prove. So, I mean, I know you've worked on that before and tried to do that before, right? I mean, it's difficult.
It is incredibly difficult to prove that somebody is habitual drunk, unless you can get that person to admit it.
Yeah, fess up, basically,
We
right?
did have, I think it was you handled the deposition for me because I was out of town. We did have one time where we took the deposition of the individual, and he said, I had a problem at the time, unfortunately, and I've since he got convicted.
I was about to say, I think I remember doing that deposition in Stark over in the prison or something.
Yeah, he got convicted in the criminal case, and he was in prison. He said since he's gone to jail, and he had gotten into treatment, and he was doing a lot better, and he was sober. But they will admit it sometimes. the harder ones are people that just, they don't believe that they have a problem.
Right.
And unfortunately, that's the case a lot of times
Pretty
with
common,
people,
yeah.
people that do have a drinking problem, a drug problem, any sort of problem like that. They don't want to admit it. And, I've had cases where it's pretty clear that the person has a problem, but then, we'll take the depositions of their family to try to figure this out. And the family will, they'll back them up and be like, they don't have a problem. There's no problem there. And, like, what about the fact that they've had 3 DUIs? What about the fact that they've had all these brushes with the law, and every single one of them has to do with alcohol, and that they were served 15 drinks at the bar that night, like,
And still walked out.
and still walked out, and like didn't seem to have, like, I had a case one time where the individual, the person that caused the collision, it was 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they rear-ended my client, and when the officer took when the blood draw was done, it came back that the person was like 5 or 6 times over the legal limit, like to the point where you would think this person would be passed out or like on life support. And the officer, when I talked to the officer, he was like, "This is just so wild, because when I talked to her, she seemed completely normal."
That's crazy.
And you think about somebody like that, and you're like, they've got a problem.
Yeah, right.
But those sort of things that we deal with in those cases.
Sure. Well, what about also with, I know one thing that comes up a lot, or especially around college towns, is going to the first one in terms of getting in trouble for knowingly serving someone who's underage. How's it work with fake IDs? I mean, does that, if a kid shows a fake ID, does that automatically get the bar off the hook, or what?
That's a great question. That is a great question. That's actually in the statute. The statute, if the bar can prove that the underage individual used a fake ID, there's a presumption against liability against the bar that then shifts back to the underage person, and they have to overcome that presumption. And basically, they have to present some sort of argument that the bar knew that they were using a fake ID. We all hear stories about it. These kids, I mean, we were in college one time. We know how this stuff works. Sure. If you're in a certain group of friends, and you have a friend that works the door at the bar, it's not going to be very difficult for you to get in the bar. Right. So think of a situation where one of these students goes to a bar, and they knew the person at the door, and the person at the door knew they were underage, but they're like, "Hey man, just show me a fake ID so it looks like you're showing me something, and I'm doing my job, and I'll let you in. Like, I know the person on the ID is not you, but if you show it to me, we'll let you in." So those are the sort of things that somebody can present as evidence against that presumption. Like, I did present a fake ID. I did have a fake ID on me, but they knew that I was underage still. So there is protections in the law for that. But I mean, like I said, we were both in college, and this isn't a new phenomenon.
Right.
I mean, this has been going on for years, and a lot of times these bars like to just kind of throw their hands up and be like, "Oh, there's nothing that we could do about it." And then you start looking into the procedures that they have in place to prevent underage drinking, and they're non-existent. Right. So it's like, all right, well, you can't just throw your hands up and say that there's nothing we could do about it, when you actually were not trying to do anything about it in the first place.
Sure. Which of course kind of ties into the whole, what's the bar's incentive? Sell more alcohol, right? Like, how much money do the bars make off underage kids? I mean, it's like they know they got to, like, they're supposed, there's a law that says they're supposed to do something, but it's like, are they really that strict on enforcing these rules, knowing that they're going to make a lot of money if they don't?
Right. And that's funny that you bring that up, because I had a case here in Tallahassee where the bar, after we got the case, and it was a horrible case, and it was an unfortunate situation where an underage individual passed away after they were served at a local bar. And the first thing that I did after I signed this case up is I went on the social media for the bar, and I went back to the time that this underage girl was going to the bar, and they had this third party coming in, and the bar was well aware of the fact that this third party promoter was coming in, and they were putting things out on Facebook that were enticing these kids to come in, or anybody to come in, and basically saying, come to such and such place tonight and get blackout. Come to the Blackout Rage Fest tonight, or come drink until you can't see straight. Saying things like that, and then I get into the deposition of the person that was doing the promoting, and of course, by the time I got him into the deposition, he had moved away from Tallahassee, and he had a family of his own at that point, and I took the deposition of him. I'm starting to get a little teary-eyed about this. I took his deposition, and he was distraught about it. So it's something that we deal with in these cases.
Yeah, no, they're tough. I mean, there are definitely a lot of emotions, in those kind of cases, especially when you're talking about, young kids dying because of it. It's tough. And it's one of those things where it affects obviously the family of, the girl who died, but also affects everybody who's surrounding the whole situation. I'm sure it affected that guy too, as him being a promoter, he knew he had some role in it. And then, later on he has a family of his own. He's probably looking back and realizing it's a tough situation,
Yeah, well, he had to look at the Facebook posts that he had put out, and it wasn't easy for him to do it. I showed him to him, and he looked at him, and I was like, well, can you read that for the jury? Because this was going to be something that we were going to present in a jury trial, and he couldn't even get through the post
without breaking down. Yeah, it's tough.
So
it's tough.
But yeah, we deal with this. We deal with these cases all the time, and it's unfortunate. And there's repeat offenders. I'm not going to say any names, but there's bars in Tallahassee that everybody kind of knows are the places where underage kids go. There's a particular bar, and it's interesting because on one of the community groups on social media, their name actually came up on that group recently, and somebody said, what is the deal with this bar? I saw they closed down, and all of the comments were like, well, it's probably because of all the underage drinking that goes on there. They probably finally got caught.
Right.
So people know about it, and people just kind of expect that if people are serving kids underage, it's just really easy to prove that. And it's not.
Right.
It's not an easy thing to prove. The bartenders aren't. They're not chomping at the bit to throw the bar under the bus. Obviously, the owner's not going to admit knowing anything about serving minors, and they're just tough cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the way that there's all that, and then like going back to what you're talking about at the beginning, and then the changes in the law and the way that the Supreme Court interprets the law just makes it even harder, basically. So they're definitely tough cases.
Yeah. Anything else you want to talk about with Dram shop?
I don't have anything else on that.
I guess the only thing that I'll add to it is, I just keep harping on this. This is not a new phenomenon. This is something that's been going on for years and years and years. But as we are in a college town, and kids here are going to drink underage, and they're going to do whatever they can to try to drink underage. And the only thing that I can say to these bars is, there's one particular bar, and I'll name them. Bullwinkle's in town. Like, try getting into that place.
Right.
As an underage individual, like, it's not happening.
Right.
And kids know that, so they don't even try to get in there. And I remember when I was in law school here, I was of age at that point, but I remember going in there, and they had like a cop at both entrances, and if you were trying to use a fake ID and they thought that it was what's going on with this fake ID, and there was any issue with it, they'd just hand it to the cop.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
Lots of people getting arrested there. But to these bar owners, just make an effort.
Right.
Bullwinkle's obviously does it. Follow their lead. Just do what they do, and you're not going to have any problem with us knocking on your door.
Sure.
Because if somebody is able to get into Bullwinkle's and drink, and they're underage, then they really were scheming the system, well.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah. They definitely, seem to be, setting a good example. It's just, wishing that maybe more people would follow it, or more other establishments would follow it.
Exactly.
No matter your injury, Nani Hamola is here to help you recover. Visit noho.law today.